Good evening, everybody. Today is the second day of our lecture series, the beginning of social sciences and scientific method. I hope you enjoyed the lecture of previous day. I hope today you will also enjoy our lecture. So I should say that YouTube, we are streaming on YouTube live. So if you are disconnected by any network issues, so please go on YouTube and you can watch there. Our room will be locked at 7:15 p.m. So make sure that your network is fine and stay with us. So without wasting the time, I think I would like to invite our professor Subrata Shankar Bagchi to deliver the lecture. So sir, let's start.
Thank you, Pushpita, for the introduction. I hope all of you are keeping well. Today is the second day of this lecture series, where we will see the rise of scientific social sciences and scientific method. Let me share the screen first. Well, as I said, this is the second lecture of this series. Let us have I think in the brief video, you could recap a few of those things that I said in those lectures, in the previous lecture. But let us have a kind of brief recap. We have seen there the debate between natural and social, rise of positivism, Auguste Comte, positivism in social sciences, positivist social sciences. These are the things that we discussed in the previous lecture. Now let us go back to the same mosaic of three major approaches of social sciences. One, obviously, that is positivistic social science that we discussed in the previous lecture. That I will discuss today. And third one is critical social science that will be discussed in the next lecture. And of course, I will also very briefly discuss feminist social science and postmodern social science. Now, let us go straight to interpretive social science. Now, they were against the logical positivists who tried to emulate the natural science in social science. They wanted to apply the laws of natural science in social sciences. They wanted to explain social sciences in terms of natural sciences. But this interpretive social science was against this emulation. Social phenomena, according to them, social phenomena do not lend themselves to such rigid analysis. We cannot rigidly emulate natural science, laws of natural science when we discuss or when we explain social phenomena. Social phenomena and natural phenomena are two different ball game altogether. Now, it requires a different approach of empathy, interpretation, and understanding. That was a basic argument of this interpretive camp. If you want to discuss or rather explain a social phenomenon, you need to have a different approach of empathy, which is a combination of empathy, interpretation, and understanding. This is a kind of groundbreaking observation as far as explaining social phenomena is concerned. Now, the debate raged between the constructivism and objectivism. Now, once again, this is a classic debate, whether it's rabbitcism or duckism. I mean, the constructivist has a very good followers, but it was an age-old objectivism that really reigned the scene for a very long time. Now, we talk about constructivism. This is what constructivism says, that nature of social phenomena depends on social actors that are involved there, not any natural issues, not any natural event, or not any natural element. The nature of social phenomena are dependent on the social actors itself, those who have performed the phenomena. Reality is not independent and external, according to this camp, constructivism. Reality is very much inside, and it is not independent of human intervention. Only man, or rather human beings, can really intervene into the nature of reality and change the nature of reality. That was their argument as against the objectivists. Instead, they thought that reality is considered primarily a mental construct that depends on the observer and the context. So reality is basically a mental construction. It depends on the observer and the context. Social actors create the reality, and it's a mental construct. It's not external to human mind. It's not independent of human mind. It's actually very much a mental construction. So you can see an uncanny resemblance of this camp with the rationalists. You can remember the rationalists actually were very fond of saying this thing. It's a mental construction. Now, let us talk about happiness. It's always a mental construction. It's not independent. It's not external to our survival, or to our existence. Now, what makes this family so happy? This family apparently doesn't have any material, any enviable material position. They somehow eke out their survival, but they're so happy. So can we say that reality is external and independent? These people are happy. They don't live in high rises. They don't have bungalow. Possibly they don't have their own house. You can see the bed there. They live on the side of a road, possibly, but they're happy. So can you tell me what makes this family so happy? That's constructivism for you. Now, interpretivism. If it says that if our psychological and social reality is constructed, subjective and elusive, how do we obtain any knowledge about it. That's very pertinent issue. If our psychological and social reality is constructed and subjective and elusive, mental construction, then how do we obtain any knowledge about it? Because it becomes individualistic. Happiness, why I am happy, it's internal. I cannot get knowledge about happiness if it is constructed, subjective, elusive, and internal. So that's really the epistemological position, which fits the ontological position of constructivism. So a group of related views came, which is known as interpretivism. So this group tried to answer this epistemological position and this question, which is basically an epistemological question, the nature of knowledge. Now, you can have several stairs. You can walk up to the stairs in different ways. But the main thing is that you'll have to go up the stairs, or maybe you have to go down. You'll have to break the stairs. You will have to get the knowledge. So the nature of knowledge in interpretivism is different than we saw in positivism. Three main interpretivist views: hermeneutics, phenomenology, and Verstehen. When I will discuss phenomenology, I will briefly discuss ethnomethodology also. There are other interpretivist views also, but well, I will confine myself into these three major views. They differ on how this understanding of psychological and social reality can be gained. All these camps, all these views differ on how this understanding of psychological and social reality can be gained, how the knowledge can be gained about psychological and social reality. But the crux remain the same. The main thing remain the same. They actually said that, well, all of them hold that view that it's really a mental construct. Reality is a mental construct. Reality is not external and independent. That's a common point, but they differ on how to gain knowledge on social reality or psychological reality. Let us talk about hermeneutics briefly. Once again, it's a very big topic, very big subject, and well, it's hardcore philosophy. I'll try to ground it in social sciences, I mean, the way the students can understand. Hermeneutics, the term hermeneutics, as you all know possibly, came from the Greek god Hermes. It's basically interpretation of scripture or text. I mean, it's a very old trend of understanding or interpretation of scripture and text, basically biblical texts, biblical scriptures were understood through hermeneutics. Well, later as it progressed, the definition of text or concept of text changed. Here, it didn't remain confined or didn't remain limited to biblical scripture. Here they say that a text can be any form of communication, verbal, non-verbal, kinestics, any form of communication can form a text. Interpretation is not just what is being said, but how it is said as well. We mostly try to understand what is being said, but we don't try to understand how it is said. I mean, this what is this how is no less important than what. I mean, what is said and how it is said, it's both are equally important. If we don't understand how it is said, then we won't understand what is being said. And if we don't understand what is being said, we won't understand how it is said. So it's kind of jigsaw puzzle. What is being said and how it is said. You have to understand that. So themes of hermeneutics have been introduced to the English-speaking world by the writings of Max Weber. Very unlikely person. But well, Max Weber was the first person from in the England who were familiar with hermeneutics, and through whose writing the Anglo-Saxon world were could really started to gain knowledge about hermeneutics. Now he was very fond of and very familiar to the philosophies of Dilthey, Reichert, and Windelband, the main persons of hermeneutic social sciences. They argued rather, that the study of the social and historical world requires the use of methods which are different from those employed in the investigation of natural phenomena. We cannot really investigate social and historical world with the methods that are applied to investigate natural phenomena. We cannot. That's the breaking point. That's the kind of launching pad that hermeneutics wanted to have. And Max Weber, as well as these three stalwarts, gave that launching pad. Well, this is reflected in Weber's own emphasis on the concept of understanding, Verstehen. We'll talk about Verstehen in the later part of this lecture. So hermeneutics actually say that we cannot really explain social phenomena with the methods of natural phenomena. And if we do, we'll have the problem like that. In between there is a figure. The figure is constant. Figure can be visible from two sides, but it's constant. If we apply the method of natural science to understand this figure, one would say 6, another would say 9. So why could we understand, how could we understand the social phenomena? We'll have to understand whether it's 9 or 6 in the context. If it is, say for example, if it is a Q, then 9 and 6 matters, 9 or 6, both matter very deep, but at the same time, in other social events, this 9 or 6 can be a very big problem. can be a very big difference. So you will have to understand in its proper context, and you cannot really apply the methods of natural science here to understand the social world. 20th century hermeneutics were initiated by Heidegger. Hermeneutic problem is linked with the question of knowledge, as Dilthey said. For Heidegger, it is tied to the question of being, ontological question, as I said earlier. It's basically problems of understanding and interpretation are encountered while unfolding fundamental features of our beings in the world. I mean, basically this problem of understanding and interpretation. Understanding and interpretation is always a problem if we exist, being in the world. Since we exist, it will always be, there will always be a difference between understanding and interpretation. I will come back to this point later. I'm elaborating it. Understanding is the first and foremost matter of projecting what we are capable of. I mean, that's the beginning point. We need an understanding. First and foremost, a matter of projecting what we are capable of, the parts. Then we come to interpretation, that is whole. This is known as hermeneutic circle. Let us draw a very the outline of the hermeneutic circle. I will draw this hermeneutic circle proper. I will come back to this hermeneutic circle thrice during this lecture. This is the first very introductory hermeneutic circle. Here you are. On the lower side is the part. On the upper side, that is whole. Part is a part of life. Understanding, the part of life. And if we start integrating this part, we'll get whole. And with that whole, we have to contextualize it in terms of part. That's the basics of a hermeneutic circle. I mean, understanding is the part. Whole is the interpretation. So here you are. From part to whole, you will have to integrate first, then contextualize. This is hermeneutic circle for you. Now let us once again try to elaborate on this hermeneutic circle. Here you are, the parts. You can relate these parts with this one, the engagement here. So parts synthesized to whole, and whole is analyzed to parts. Now coming to the right side of the circle on the right side. Here you are. On the lower side, you have the part of life. There is engagement with the phenomena. Each day, each passing day, each passing moment, we engage with some phenomena. That becomes part of life. Okay? Now, engagement, this engagement is looped here with the engagement with part elicits feedback, which challenges our understanding of the whole. So this engagement of with part have various feedback. And we always try to engage ourselves in terms of whole. We try to understand everything in terms of whole, though we actually encounter parts, actually encounter phenomena in our life. But we try to reflect the phenomena in terms of our whole of life. And how do we do that? we first engage with part that elicits feedback, which challenges our understanding of the whole. Then the challenge triggers reflection, reinterpretation, and greater understanding of those parts. And then we have understanding. This raises question about or need for the meaning of the event, the part. Even we go to the whole, we will have to come back to the individual parts, because we sometimes miss various nuances of the parts. So it raises question about or need for the meaning of an event. We'll have to come back to the part then. The need for meaning is projected through action of speech. Then we again engage ourselves with phenomena and part of life. This loop goes on throughout our life. This is hermeneutics for you. Hermeneutic loop, as proposed by the initial hermeneutic stalwarts. Now, this hermeneutics actually explain social phenomena by interpreting people's behavior within their social context. That's important. I mean, they don't want to understand the behavior, people's behavior, by delineating, actually separating those people from their phenomena. They try to understand, they explain the social phenomena in their own social context by interpreting people's behavior in their own social context. Now, researchers need to take context into account and try to understand how people sees the world in order to understand their actions. So it's very important. We always try to see the world to understand our actions, to justify our actions. So that's the main thing. Now, we'll have to understand that. We'll have to go to that level if we want to understand the people's behavior, interpretation of people's behavior. Here you are. I mean, this boy is very joyous, but at the same, he is actually seeing so many things. He's so joyous, but what's the reason for his joy? Is he actually joyous because he is seeing the nature? Possibly not. He has other engagement in this field. That's it. So we need to understand the world or interpret people's behavior in their own social context. Otherwise, we can miss many things. If you don't see the last snippet or last this one, you'll possibly misunderstand that the boy is actually very joyous because he has seen so many natural phenomena in a brief time. Now, Gadamer, another major hermeneutics stalwart, in his book Truth and Method, has created another niche, that is the niche of prejudice. He said that a connection between anticipatory character of understanding and the interrelated notions of prejudice and authority and tradition is very much imminent. So there is a connection between anticipatory character of understanding. I can understand a particular behavior, or I can comprehend the understanding of a particular person only when I have the idea of that person's or that cultural group's prejudice, authority, and tradition. That's a very important aspect. So we always consider prejudices as negative, but this is unjustified prejudice. Calling prejudice a negative thing is an unjustified prejudice stemming from enlightenment. This is Cartesian logic. Cogito ergo sum. You think, therefore you exist. So, prejudice is not rational. So, it says that, well, prejudices are unjustified, negative, sorry. But this is another prejudice. As far as Gadamer is concerned, there are legitimate prejudices based on the recognition of authority and that form of authority which has a particular value in tradition. So there can be legitimate prejudices which recognizes particular authority and one form of authority which has a particular value, that is tradition. Tradition and authority, or the authority, traditional authority and tradition, a combination of tradition and authority can lead to legitimate prejudice. So when I was in Canada, I was teaching there, I always thought why they have Queen's picture on their bills, on their notes, currency notes. I asked them. But well, this is I said that this is 21st century. Why you carry this picture? We long ago we have left this queen. But you are an independent country. But they say that this is a tradition. I found that, well, it's a prejudice, but legitimate prejudice based on a kind of symbolic authority and a tradition. Queen is still the symbolic head of Canada and Australia, as well as New Zealand. So there you are. I mean, legitimate prejudices can have so many examples of legitimate prejudices. I can go on, but well, I prefer not. We always immersed in traditions which provide us with the prejudices that make understanding possible. You can, if you don't understand the legitimate prejudices in a particular culture, you won't be able to understand the culture well. So that prejudices are immersed in tradition. Hence, there can be no standpoint outside of history from which the totality of historical effects can be grasped. We cannot be ahistorical. We cannot take it as a kind of face value. All behaviors, all cultural events have a kind of entangled in history. Instead, understanding must be seen as an open and continuous, renewed fusion of historical horizons. Every understanding is a kind of fusion of historical horizons, renewed fusion and continuous fusion. So every social phenomena should be understood in terms of the history of production of that social phenomena. And it's a continuous process. It's continuous, renewed fusion of historical horizons that we must strive for. Once again, why Hindus worship cow? That's legitimate prejudices. I mean, if you go to a kind of devout Hindu, he can go on saying maybe 50 reasons of worshipping a cow. So So when we see an event or when we see a social phenomena, we must have historical horizons in our mind. There is a history of cow worshipping in India, and there is a historical context of that. So we need to understand it, though it can seem to be a legitimate prejudice. This hermeneutics has been challenged by Habermas and other representatives of critical theory. We will talk about critical social science briefly. Hermeneutics, Habermas attacked the link between understanding and tradition. He said that it's a very dangerous link or dangerous sort of lasso that we should refrain from. The link, such a link underplays the extent to which traditions may also be a source of power. Say, for example, if we were a monarchy, then, well, it's a kind of tradition and it's a kind of legitimate prejudice, understanding to be understood in terms of tradition, but it's also a source of power, which distorts the process of communication and which calls for critical reflection. It has the capacity of distorting the process of communication. You cannot communicate a devout Englishman in favor of, who is in favor of Queen. You cannot communicate with him. Though Queen doesn't do anything, or the entire family is actually surviving on the taxpayer money with no value at all, only the value of tradition itself. But you cannot really argue with a devout Englishman. Habermas sketched the framework for a depth hermeneutical discipline, which would be oriented to the idea of emancipation. So he tried to separate tradition from understanding. And then he said, if we separate tradition from understanding, we can have the same interpretive view on understanding behaviors or social events. But this will be a depth hermeneutical discipline, and it can be an emancipatory idea. This, if you can understand, if you can comprehend the understanding of a particular person, it can be an emancipatory idea. Now, the debate between hermeneutics and critical theory has been reappraised by Paul Ricoeur. Very briefly, I'll discuss Paul Ricoeur here. Paul Ricoeur said that, well, we must re-emphasize the concept of text. Text is actually anything that may be imbibed or that may be kind of immersed into the experience of belonging to a tradition. A text presupposes a distance or distanciation from the social, historical, and psychological condition of production. That's important. Text, when it is formed, it is basically a distance, or it creates a distance from social, historical, psychological conditions of the production. The moment it's produced, it is getting separated. Now, he created hermeneutics of hope. The term hope, text about hope, is itself distanciated from social, historical, and psychological conditions of production. Hope means that you are actually doing, or we are actually trying to have a kind of idea which may not be real in the social, historical, and psychological conditions of production. So that's hermeneutics for you. So interpretation of a text involving both structural interpretation of its senses and the creative projection of its reference. Both are important. It allows the possibility of establishing critical relation vis-a-vis the world as well as the self. Now, it shows how the model of the text and the method of text interpretation can be fruitfully extended to the study of varied phenomena as metaphor, action, and the consciousness. He worked extensively on this metaphor, action, and unconscious. I'll talk about this loop later. Let me go back to these points later. Again, I mean, when we interpret a text, we involve structural explanation of its senses. What does it mean? So it's a kind of structural explanation of the senses. And it creates a projection of its reference. I mean, we try to relate with our experience. Go back to, just try to recollect the loop, the whole and the part. It is the part, that is the text. Okay. Now, we want to understand text in terms of a reference, creative projection of reference in terms of our whole life, and it allows the possibility of establishing a critical relation between vis-a-vis the world as well as the self. So this text can be a critical relation. It can establish a critical relation between the world and the self. I have created the text, so it is the connecting point of the world with me, with self. That's hermeneutic, that's Rickard's hermeneutics. And it shows how model of text and the method of text interpretation can be fruitfully extended to the study of varied phenomena. I mean, first the model of text and the method of text interpretation. This model and the method were applied fruitfully in varied phenomena, metaphor, to understand metaphor, action, unconscious, all these things can be very fruitfully understood. This is the Rickard's hermeneutic cycle. In the middle, you have the text, discourse fixed in writing. Okay, text must be understood. I mean, the two extremes are there, understanding and explanation. So both are two. These are two-way. These are two-way process. Explanation requires understanding, and as also understanding requires explanation. Now, this text first, with the understanding, get distantiated. Distanciation and appropriation are dialectic counterparts. I mean, we'll find the appropriation later. I mean, first we distantiate from the social, political, and our psychological being. The text has been created. It must be distantiated to explain, to get the explanation. Movement is not unidirectional, it can't be unidirectional. I mean, from understanding to explanation and explanation to understanding, it's a direct relation, as well as you can have a distantiated relation. Through distantiated relation, you can have an explanation of the text, and with that explanation you again get the understanding of the text. Then from distanciation you get the explanation, and then new ways of being in the world. I mean, new ways of existing, new ways, you can find new ways of existence, or you can have new explanation of existence. That is appropriation. It's a continuous movement between parts and the wholes. Here you are the parts, and that is the whole. And once the arc is complete, the process is repeated. This is the repetition, continuous process that is repeated over and over again. So a text in any form, a verbal, non-verbal, anything. I'll come back. I'll discuss it later also. Say for example, I'm going to this one. No, sorry. Okay. Any text. Let's say for example any. I've said something. I've said that males do not like opinionated women. So that's the text. First, we need to understand. First process is understanding the text. Here we have males. Which male? We don't know. Opinionated women, of which class? We don't know. But well, as far as the text is concerned, we have a kind of understanding that this is a social phenomenon. The text has been created. So understanding and explanation goes side by side, both ways. Distanciating from this text creates an explanation that, well, yes, maybe males don't like opinionated women because opinionated women can challenge patriarchy. That's explanation. With the distanciation, you can get that kind of interpretation. And challenging patriarchy can become again, I mean, this interpretation, that's this explanation, sorry, this explanation or interpretation, whatever, can appropriated by saying that which kind of male you are talking about and which kind of women you are talking about. Does it consider, are you considering the middle class phenomenon or the phenomenon, generalized phenomenon? So this loop, this loop can go on and on and on with this kind of interpretation. The text is there and you can interpret continuously. And you can create a new text also. And with this kind of interpretation, you can go from part to whole and whole to part. Culture is symbolic construct, as I said. Another very important issue in hermeneutics. These three are basically the same. That's Tripitaka for you, the Buddhist holy scripture. Okay, so you can carry the Tripitaka. You can have in your spin, monk spin, and you can also rotate this circular structure in the monastery, and all these indicate that you are carrying Tripitaka, and these two are, the two on the right side, are expressing that, well, you are reading Tripitaka. So culture, none of these can actually be a Tripitaka. Here the culture is symbolic construct. So that's hermeneutics for you. I mean, interpretation of text can be in different way. So when we say culture, culture is a symbolic construct. It can be interpreted in various ways, and it can be interpreted in that, it can be put in the hermeneutic circle, and it can go on and on and on. And of course, culture as text. These children are creating text. It's not integrated whole, as Tyler said. It's a text. And we are creating that text every time, every time. And well, these two children are creating text over and over again, and it can be understood in that loop, through that loop. Well, hermeneutics has changed over the years with ideas of communication and understanding. I mean, these days hermeneutics is a very important tool of communication and understanding. As technology progressed, moved past just verbal and written communication. I mean, it cannot. We are not confined with these two forms of communication. There are so many communications that we see through the help of technology. We also look for the personality of the author, who they are, and how that affects the text. I mean, to understand a text properly, we need to understand the personality of the author, who they are, and how that affects the text. Our modern consciousness has shaped in such a way that we imagine ourselves as islands of awareness floating in the grand ocean of life, disconnected from our other selves. And this is known as disengaged self. Here you are. We are on the islands of awareness, floating in the ground of the ocean of life, disconnected from ourselves, other selves. We can see that in this pandemic also. I mean, the problem that we face is that we are living in the islands of awareness, floating, as they say, floating in the grand ocean of life, but disconnected from other selves. Now let us talk about phenomenology. Hegel first wrote this book, Phenomenology of Spirit. As philosophical movement, phenomenology was founded by Edmund Husserl to provide with a foundation that will enable it to be pure and autonomous discipline free from all presuppositions. Phenomenology tried to create a philosophy which is pure and autonomous discipline, free from all presuppositions. Its method was essentially descriptive, and it aims to uncover the fundamental structures of intentionality, consciousness, and human life world. So in a descriptive method, it tried to uncover the fundamental structure of intentionality. What was the intention of that of the actor, consciousness of the actor, and human life world, as they say, Lebenswelt. The idea of life world or of lived experience that is always taken for granted, even by empirical sciences, is one of the main concepts of phenomenology. So whatever we see about lived experiences are the contribution of phenomenology. And we often, I mean, in science and in other forms of social sciences, we neglect that. We take it as granted, lived experience. What's the use of lived experience? It cannot be quantified. So here in phenomenology, it says that the lived experience of the life world is the main concept, main tool to understand phenomenology. It is closely linked with hermeneutics. Now here are the messy reading table that the debate that we face, that I face regularly in my house. What's the use of it? I mean, how I can put it in phenomenological terms. Alfred Schulz. For Alfred Schulz, the transition from pure phenomenology and modern social sciences, Alfred Schulz was the first person who actually brought phenomenology to modern social sciences. It starts from the premises that people are not inert objects. They are not inert. They think and feel about the world around them, and this influences their action. They can feel, they can think, and about the world around them, and this influences their actions. To understand their action, it is necessary to investigate the meaning that they attach to the phenomena that they experience. So, if you want to understand the human actions, you need to investigate what meaning they attach to the phenomena that they experience. What meaning this messy study table, what meaning I attach to this messy study table must be understood. But well, unfortunately, it is not understood in my house also. So that's important. You need to understand the actions in terms of the actor's own perception about the meaning of the phenomenon, meaning that the actors attach to the phenomenon. That's important. Messy study table is important for the study, not the clean study table. For me, of course, for me. Investigating how people experience the world from their perspectives, it's important for the phenomenology. And to achieve such an understanding of someone else's experiences, researchers need to eliminate as many of their own preconceived notions as they possibly can. To understand the actions in terms of actors' own meaning on the phenomena, the researcher need to understand, need to eliminate his or her own preconceived notions as they possibly can. But who can really discuss this in my house? You can't. You can't really reason with the non-reason. Maybe a reason with a non-reason or non-reason with the reason. Somebody can help me. But well, here you are. This is 4 and this is 3. Both are correct. But it depends on the meaning they attached. Actors' own perception about the phenomena is important. From this side, it's clearly 4. From that side, it's clearly 3. It can be 2 separate outcomes, but both are meaningful. That's important. In contemporary sociology, the use of Schultz's idea has been taken several directions. Common to all is an effort to clarify the philosophical and methodological foundation of sociological thought. Here all the trends that was created from Schultz's idea have a common thread. That is to clarify the philosophical and methodological foundation of sociological knowledge. That's basically epistemological question. Now, philosophical and methodological foundation of sociological knowledge is the central theme of phenomenology as well as the trends developed from phenomenology. First one is social constructivism by P. Berger and Luckman. Here, which is primarily concerned with how a phenomenological approach can redirect the traditional sociology of knowledge towards an investigation of taken for granted world of common sense knowledge. So, with this phenomenological knowledge, we can investigate the taken for granted world of common sense knowledge. We have so many things in our surroundings that's taken for granted. So it's a common sense knowledge. With phenomenology, traditional sociology can actually delve into that. I'll briefly talk about ethnomethodology also. They also actually have a kind of similar methodology of study. Second one is cognitive sociology by Sokurels, Method and Measurement in Sociology, a critique of research methods of conventional social science which fails to recognize the implicit use of common sense knowledge. Once again, the common sense knowledge is important. All are epistemological in nature. That is cognitive sociology. Cognitive anthropology had a different route from ethnosciences and other things, but cognitive sociology developed from phenomenology. I hope we can have our lecture series on theories in anthropology, but maybe later. But there is a difference between cognitive sociology and cognitive anthropology. Then Garfinkel's ethnomethodology, the most radical use of phenomenological ideas resulting in fundamental skepticism of the achievements of social sciences. The achievements of conventional social sciences have been challenged by ethnomethodology. It's the most radical phenomenological idea. And of course, Morle-Ponty, Jean-Paul Sartre, Arendt, these people have different ideological background, though. They're interested in the nature of human sciences. Of course, Sartre, for example, tried to combine phenomenological ideas with those from other traditions such as Marxism and existentialism. Both were Sartre's ideas. Now let us talk about ethnomethodology. Once again, very brief. I mean, it takes a separate lecture on ethnomethodology. It was initiated by Garfinkel. It means study of the methods people use to accomplish their life. So we have a method that's important, very important. We have a method that we use to accomplish in our everyday life. Have we ever noticed that the way we negotiate day-to-day affairs, the way we interact every time in day-to-day proceedings, the way we interact every day, have some methods? Have you ever noticed that? Yes, I mean, ethnomethodology say that we have method. We have different methods. So, say, for example, some people are pathological liar. They lie every time, every day. That's their method. I am reticent about lying. This is not that I've never lied, but well, I prefer not to lie, because if you lie, you'll have to understand. You'll have to remember a different version of your statement, and you will have to remember which version you have narrated, which version to whom. That's very cumbersome. So why not stick to one version that is truth? That's my method. But different methods can be applied to accomplish in our everyday life, and they want to delve into that method. It's developed from Schul's approach to phenomenology. There is no real social order and social life appears orderly to the members of the society only because members actively engage in making sense of social life. So it says that, well, we don't have any social order. And social life is not orderly. We perceive it as orderly because we always engage in making sense of social life. If we cannot make sense of a disorderly thing, so we make it orderly in our perception so that we can understand or we can explain the meaning of our life. But life doesn't have any meaning. Concerned with the methods used by the people to construct, account for, and give meaning to their social world is very important for ethnomethodologists. So, how people construct the method, account for it, and give meaning to their social world is very important. And each life is important. As far as ethnomethodology is concerned, each life is important. Now here they see how members of the society go about task of seeing, describing, explaining the order in the world in which they live. They try to delve in the day-to-day affairs, how people see, describe, explain the order. That's important. That's ethnomethodology. Now, ethnomethodologists actually try to uncover the taken for granted rules that are there in the society. How they do that? They disturb the normal situations. It takes place in casual, non-institutional settings such as home. If we disturb the normal setting, then only we can understand what is normal. Otherwise, we don't understand the normal. I mean, our students say that, well, they think their parents are normally obliged to them. Well, I have a disturbance in my life. I lost my father at a very early age. I know what is normal because the setting was disturbed in my life. So I don't want any such disturbance in my student's life, God forbid. But well, there can be many such issues. After that, they will understand what are the contributions of their parents. They take it for granted. So, ethnomethodologists use a particular method which is known as breaching experiments. So here they include open-ended and in-depth interviews, participant observation, videotaping, documentary and ethnomethodological experiments, which are known as breaching experiments. These ethnometrical experiments are quite common. When I taught sociology and anthropology in North America, I used to conduct many such. My students used to conduct rather many such breaching experiments. I'll tell you one such breaching experience. It's Garfinkel's idea, breaching experiment. Now, breaching experiments involve violating the everyday rules as a technique of discovering social order through its disruption. So, disrupting the normal rule, normal setting, and try to get the sense of the normal after disturbing the normal setting. Social reality is violated to shed light on the methods by which people construct reality. Here the reality is violated. To understand what was the reality, to understand how people construct social reality. People seek balance and normalcy in their social life. The researcher enters in a social setting, violates and breaches the rules that govern it, and studies how interactants deal with the breach. That's very important. They enter into the social setting, violates or breaches the rule, and study how the person is dealing with the breach. One such common breaching experiment that I experimented with students, our students really conducted this experiment, is grabbing or they're stealing the shopping cart in a shopping mall. Say, for example, you are shopping in a mall, you have taken a cart, you have put your articles there. Sometimes you keep it unattended. Okay. You think that is your cart, but you don't consider it as your own in your actions. That's normal. I mean, that's normal thing is that the cart belongs to me because I put articles in it. If somebody takes away your cart and starts shopping on that cart, how do you feel? Then you can understand that it was my cart. It belonged to me, though I didn't behave like I should have with my own cart. That's breaching experiment. We had several such breaching experiments, door holding pattern in the West, in the lift. Such breaching experiments, I had a very good results for the students. And yes, of course, I mean, these are the breaching experiments that are often conducted as a part of a course and as a part of a research also. Then the last thing that I want to discuss about is the Verstehen. It has close ties with both hermeneutics and phenomenology. It's meaningful understanding, putting yourself in the shoes of others to see things from their perspective. So you're putting shoes of others to see from their perspective. It refers to the empathic understanding of social phenomena. I mean, you don't have to detach yourself to understand a social phenomena. You must have a kind of empathic understanding of social phenomena. Researchers need to assume the perspective of the research subjects to interpret how they see the world. So perspective is important. Perspective of the research subject to interpret how they see the world is important. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand the reality properly. Only then can a researcher try to explain their actions. You cannot really explain the action if we don't understand, we don't try to interpret how they see the world. Now, Verstehen sociology, interpretive sociology, was the handiwork of Max Weber as well as George Simmel. They introduced interpretive understanding, Verstehen, into sociology. The study of society that concentrates on the meanings people associate with the social world. It's basically study of the people, study of the society, concentrating on the meaning people associate with the social world. So we need to understand the meanings that people associate with the social world, and with that understanding of meaning, we can understand the society, the nature of the society. It strives to show that reality is constructed by people themselves in their daily lives. You found it in ethnomethodology. Here also, you can find that, well, reality is constructed by people themselves in their daily life. Reality is not external, reality not independent of our existence. It deals with the meaning attached to the behavior, unlike positivist sociology, which focuses on action. So that's the difference. They study the behavior, positivists study the action. Though Max Weber studied social action, but in terms of behavior. It sees reality as being constructed by people, unlike positivist sociology, which sees an objective reality out there. As I said, it's not out there, it's not external, it is constructed by people. It is the first person perspective that we talk about in Verstehen. It relies on qualitative data, unlike positivist sociology, which tends to make use of quantitative data. Verstehen, of course, if you study, if you see, these are the two forms of happiness. Now, can we understand why this tribal lady is smiling? Why he is so happy? Or can this tribal woman understand why this, what should I say? Why these guys are so happy and what they are doing? Both are different words. We need to understand the reality by putting our shoes in it. On the left side, you will find one form of happiness, one form of ecstasy, and on the right, you find another form. So, without any comparison, as per Verstehen sociology, we need to know how the actors put meaning to their social words. Maybe this lady has got some money, some very small amount of money in the market by selling her products. And this guys used or rather use a lot of money, should I say, and standing here. Maybe some of them have used drugs in the form of to elevate their happiness. These are the two words that we see, and we will have to understand each word by its own methodology. Well, Verstehen was introduced by Troyson. The method of natural sciences is explanation, while the history is understanding. He said that the method of natural sciences is explanation, and history is understanding. He differentiated it in this way. Concept of Verstehen was later used by German philosopher Delthe to describe first-person participatory perspective that agents have on their individual experience as well as their culture, history, and society. First-person participatory perspective that we often do in anthropological fieldwork. Agents have their own individual experiences, and their culture, their history, their society may be different. So first-person participatory perspective is very important. Verstehen played role in Heidegger's and Gadamer's facticity and life context of understanding. Verstehen also played a role in Husserl's and Schulz's analysis of the life world. I discussed about it. Habermas and Apple further transformed the concept of Verstehen, reformulating it on the basis of transcendental pragmatic philosophy of language and the theory of communicative action. That's a very big issue. I mean, the Habermas and Apple further extended Verstehen in the transcendental pragmatic philosophy. I talked about transcendental idealism, not transcendental philosophy, but well, philosophy of language. That's Pra school of language and the theory of communicative action. That's a separate thing. Now, let us talk about problems of constructivists and interpretivists. The layered interpretation. We have several interpretations which are layered. Even one interpretation may have multi-layered things. The researcher interprets subjects' interpretations and then interprets the findings again as they are placed in a framework or related to a theory. So here, researchers interpret the subject's interpretation, what subject is interpreting as a social reality, and then try to interpret the findings again as they are placed in the framework or related to theory. I mean, they come back to the theory with that interpretation. Then they try to comprehend the interpretation in terms of theory. With every added layer of interpretation, there is more chance of misinterpretation. That's the problem. That's the problem with these guys, this camp. When we actually try to interpret actors' interpretation, then I interpret it in terms of the theory. Now actors may have several layered interpretation. Even if we go to all slices of interpretation, we may lack the total interpretation. So first the host of interpretations from actors, then the researcher's own interpretation about theory, trying to relate those interpretations with the theory. So each added layer of interpretation can result in more misinterpretations. So there you are. Mostly you misinterpret many things. Layered interpretations. Then lack of comparability of outcomes. When our example happiness is subjective, say for example happiness is subjective, means different things in different cultures, we just cannot compare them. Happiness is subjective, and it means in different cultures, as I showed, in different cultures, in different way, we cannot compare them. So lack of comparability can make it impossible to generalize. This means we can never come to a general theory or universal explanation that apply to more than just particular groups in particular periods of time. So we can have several micro studies, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands micro studies. We can never generalize. So one explanation cannot be extended to other. That's the lack of comparability outcomes. As I say, happiness is subjective, means have a different connotation, different meaning in different cultures. How can you compare? But it seems both are happy in their own way. Then difference in frame of reference, another very problematic issue of the constructivists and interpretivists. If the frame of reference of the researcher is very different, it can be hard for researcher to assume subject's point of view. When I was actually standing, I'm coming back to this point, it makes it hard to find out what the relevant aspects of social context even are. I mean, what relevant aspects of social context are? Can you explain the happiness here? From materialistic point of view, from European point of view, from Western point of view, can you actually explain it? Once I was standing on the Manikarnika Ghat in Varanasi. One of my French friend asked me, how could you actually stand such a kind of horrific scenario where a corpse is actually burning. Say, for example, it's your own relative, entire body is burning. How can you actually stand? How can you actually uh, uh, survive such a kind of horrific scene? I said, well, that makes us humble. Everybody knows that his or her last destination is that everything will be burned. So Western in West, they annotate the corpses before the cremation. But here you have the nature before you, burning your own body, maybe burning your own relative's body. So that's the different frame of reference. A Western cannot understand how the burning of corpse means burning of a relative, maybe father or mother in our own life means to a person here in India, or maybe a person immersed in hedonism cannot understand the happiness of this family. Let's sum up very briefly. We have seen interpretive social science, constructivism and interpretivism, hermeneutics, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, and verstehen. Thank you for joining and listening.
Thank you very much, sir. We have questions on Zoom and as well as in YouTube. So I would like to request my co-host Ranjan to convey the questions from Zoom to you, and I will convey the questions from YouTube to you.
Sure.
So Ranjan, please.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. Wonderful presentation. There is a first question from Gargi. Is post-processual theory an example of interpretivism, and processual theory an example of positivism?
Well, that's archaeology. And of course, post-processual is post-positivist, mostly interpretivist. And processual is, of course, positivist, the 3H theory and other things. That's a different set. But well, to very briefly, it's a very big thing. Very briefly speaking, you are right you're almost right in your raising. Yes.
There is a next question from Gargi. How is theology different from hermeneutics?
Theology and hermeneutics. Hermeneutics has a root in theology. To understand to interpret the biblical texts. But it is a long way away from philosophy and theology after it took off. After the medieval period was past, the stalwarts of hermeneutics are not really firmly entrenched in theology. Maybe, the explanation is quite different. The hermeneutics, it is creating text. Text means anything, any communication, and interpreting it. And it's a problem it's a problem between interpretation and understanding. I told you about the hermeneutic loop, but it's a long way off from theology. Yes. Any other question?
Okay, thank you, sir. There is a next question from Ankona Kundu. What are the basic aspects or concepts one should consider to understand Gadamer's fusion of horizons theory?
What are
the basic aspects or concepts one should consider to understand Gadamer's fusion of horizons theory?
Fusion of horizons theory. As I said, that horizons, I mean, it's a continuous process. We need to understand the things in such a way. Just a second. What are the, can you repeat it again for me?
Yes, sir. The question is, what are the basic aspects or concepts one should consider to understand Gadamer's fusion of horizons theory?
One should take history in the background, as well as the tradition of the culture that they are studying, that the researcher is studying, and the legitimate prejudices that are there in the cultural traditions. These, at least these three things can actually give you a fusion of historical horizons that are continuously renewed. You'll have to continuously renew that. What is legitimate prejudice to one group of people may not be the same for the other groups of people. So you have to renew that. But the tradition, history, as well as the legitimate prejudices are very important to understand Gadamer's fusion of historical horizons. Yes, any other question?
So there is a next question from Gargi. So in ethnometeorology, there is no dichotomies or right or wrong.
No, I mean in interpretive sociology or interpretive social science, the dichotomy doesn't exist. It's a positivistic dichotomy. You know what? There was a museum. There was a show in museum, which relates to the cannibalism. Which cannibalism? But the plates where I could show you the picture. It was in Netherlands, in the Netherlands. So the plates full of human bones, and the projection was so horrifying that you can understand the horror of cannibalism. I mean, was it right to have a museum the gallery in a museum on cannibalism? So that's phenomenology of a museum. I mean, you can apply anywhere in the social science, of course. The dichotomy doesn't exist. When you leave positivism, the dichotomy almost blurred. Yes.
There is another question from Gargi. Can we use participant observation for Vartizen? Like you said, empathetic understanding social phenomena.
For what? For what?
For Varsitin.
For Verstehen.
Varsen.
Verstehen. Oh, yes, of course. I mean, if you have first-person perspective, you want a first-person perspective, you need to be participated. You need to be participated. There are many various ways of participating, which, of course, we can have another lecture series on research methods also. But this participatory method can be applied in Verstehen methodology. Sure. Yes, any other question?
Yes, sir. Another question from Bijoy Vidan. Engagement challenges our understanding, but do we really initiate such process of understanding, being free from the shackles of pre-existing knowledge that can oppose neither new one? What I trying to say is that engagement do really bring changes if the society doesn't allowing it. Let if science prove God doesn't exist, is it really going to change the views of the people?
No, this, engage. It can change. It can change the lives of the people if it comes to the engagement level, to the part of the life. If it doesn't come to that level, then it won't be possible to have it in a whole of life. That's important. But engagement is essential to understand any text, to start comprehending any text. And first you understand the text, then you have the interpretation of text. Engagement is very important. If the majority of the society is engaged in a particular ideological frame, well, God can be supreme or God doesn't exist. Both can happen. So that means how you are engaging yourself, how the society is engaging itself with the social phenomena. Yes, any other question?
There is another question also by Vijay Vidhan. Happiness due to success may be constant for different society, and culture doesn't it present happiness not always being subjective, but sometimes it may appear objective as well.
Have you listened to the Hindi song? इस दुनिया अगर मिल जाए भी क्या है, मिल जाए तो भी क्या है? I mean, there can be. Success doesn't always make you happy. First thing is the definition of success is very important. But well, it depends on the personality itself. Whether it makes you happy or it makes you, it brings new challenges to your life, it's a very big question. Well, I had a resounding success in securing an administrative post by defeating the government in a litigation. So, but well, was I happy? Possibly not. Not always success brings you happiness. The definition of success is very important. How you define, how you're understanding the success. Okay.
There is a question from Rishabh Balo. Can there be two hermeneutics cycle for a drug addict when he is hallucinated and when he is normal?
Well, that's a kind of entangle for me. It's a very good question. We don't, from Cartesian logic, we won't consider the hermeneutic loop of a hallucinated guy. No. But well, from interpretive sociology, of course, there can be two different loops, and it's a continuous loop. It happens to our life also. At every point of time, we are in the midst of that loop. We have got a text, then we try to understand the text in terms of a whole, then we try to interpret it in terms of the part. It happens. And it's a two different condition that a drug addict drug addict can have. So, well, there may be 2 or 3 or 4 hermeneutic loops in their life, maybe with full addiction, with half addiction, with diminutive addiction, I mean, with a very small sort of addiction, and with so-called full consciousness. Okay.
So there is another question from Rishabh Balo. Is that given his lived experiences in both sets of consequences?
Oh, that's the extension of that question. I mean,
yes.
his life experiences. Yeah. Yes. Any other question?
Yes. Another question from Suman Hajara. How to distinguish between phenomenology as an area of inquiry and phenomenology as a method?
Well, as far as phenomenology is concerned, phenomenology can be used both as a method and as a form of inquiry. I mean, as a method, it is essentially descriptive, and it aims to uncover fundamental structure of intentionality, consciousness, and human life world or lived experiences. So this is the methodology. The form, as a form of inquiry, it is basically phenomenological inquiry that we call how people are attaching meaning to their actions. That's the inquiry. I mean, it can be our own inquiry also. How we attach any social event. Say, for example, how we attach importance to so-called Chinese aggression in Indian land, on Indian land, or against India, should I say. So that's the phenomenological inquiry. That's if I act in terms of that interpretation, Chinese aggression, that well, I'll boycott the Chinese products. That's a separate sort of inquiry. That's a separate sort of reality. And if we don't do that, that's a separate sort of reality. That's a phenomenological inquiry. And method is actually how we uncover the fundamental structures. It's a researcher's inquiry. How to uncover the fundamental structures of intentionality, consciousness, and lived experiences. Yes, any other question?
Yes, sir. There is a question from Ankana Kundu. As you said, a French person cannot resist a body is burning in front of our eyes, but the person can resist a body is in burial ground. Is this psychological interpretation dependent on only social state?
No, I mean, of course, our psyche is developed from our cultural background. That's important. But that's a separate worldview, and we are belonging to separate worldview. They cannot really see that kind of burning, that it's a kind of traumatic event in there for them. But well, I mean, for us, death is a trauma that we must pass on. We must pass through, rather. But for the West, death is another phase of life, liminality, where you should resist yourself from getting carried away. If you read Derrida's aporia on grief, you will find that that grief, which is public, is not a grief for Westerners. you can grieve privately. So they produce the corpse in a very decorated way. And they put that crop in a burial ground, in a burial. So that's a passage to life separate from the living world. Here we burn the bodies to get to another world, to a different cultural settings. One can the burning can be traumatic for the Westerner, and well, burial ground can even not so traumatic for the non-Westerner. Okay. Yes. Any other question?
Sir, I will request my co-host Pushpita to read out the questions from YouTube comment section.
Sure.
I think there is some questions on Zoom, I guess, from Rishabh Balo, something.
Mm-hmm.
In case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and in case of Bruce Banner, Aka Hulk, something he was asking.
I don't understand. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde must listen to this question, total question.
Extension of the previous questions. I think the extension of the previous questions, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. In YouTube,
yeah.
on YouTube, I think we have only one question from Lipika Nath. Does the context or situation when that particular statement was delivered do play important role?
Does the
context or situation when that particular statement was delivered do play important role?
Of course. That's the basic thing of phenomenology, Verstehen, as well as hermeneutics. The context is important, mostly in Verstehen. Verstehen says that context, if you don't understand the context, you are losing the entire meaning. You are losing the entire meaning since you don't understand the context. You don't understand what kind of meaning they impart on that, or what kind of importance they impart on that context. That's important. That's the basic thing about hermeneutics. So
we don't have any questions from YouTube,
correct,
I guess.
correct.
Oh,
Today
he asked again. It's about the hermeneutical loop in case of Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, and in case of Bruce Banner, Aka Hulk, who are the same person but have two different shades of their character.
Well, it's the drug addict and the drug addict in the deluge, and drug addict in a so-called normal state. That's important. The two separate hermeneutic circles, maybe host of separate hermeneutic circles. We don't have a constant hermeneutic circle in our life also. Each time the hermeneutic circle changes with the creation of text. That's important. So
we do have another question or statement, I think, from Gargi. We do have dualities or multiple personalities within us depending on situation.
Sure. That's why multiplicity of methods, multiplicity of our understanding is important. We have multiplicity, not duality, depending on situation. So the hermeneutic circle changes. I mean, if you are asking on in that perspective, well, we are all Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. in some way or other. Hmm?
So I think we don't have any questions anymore.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining to this lecture. Tomorrow we'll have the last lecture of this series, and I would love to have feedbacks through our emails and other things. Emails. If you have WhatsApp, if you are in the WhatsApp group of Kolkata Study Circle, then you can also have feedbacks, positive, negative. How can we actually improve our presentations? That's important, very important. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir, for
sir. A wonderful presentation.
Thank you.